Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. My guests are subject matter experts whose unique perspectives will help listeners understand how the issues impact them. Let's get into The Real Spill. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And with me today is one of my very favorite people, Ayiesha Beverly. Welcome, Ayiesha.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be joining you today.
And I am honored. I know how busy you guys are, especially start of a new administration, all the things that happen in January. So thank you for taking the time to come on and chat with me today.
Absolutely.
And for those who don't know, Ayiesha is the general counsel for the National Apartment Association. So she is a very busy lady. That's why it means so much to me personally that she's taken the time to come on to my podcast today to give listeners more of an in-depth understanding of what a general counsel does, how she got to where she is. So let's get into it, guys. So Ayiesha, when did you know, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an attorney?
So, Katie, this is actually one of my favorite questions because my role today is a reminder that I achieved my dream, if you will. So to make a long story short, rewind us back to 1994. My desire to become a lawyer started when I was actually in middle school. I just dated myself a little bit there. So there would be times at the end of the school day and the start of afternoon practices, I was involved in sports, track and cheering, things like that, and other after school activities where there'd be a break in the middle of the day. And instead of going home after school, I would just go to the courthouse because it was a walking distance to our school and it was better than going home and having to come back. And so I used that as an opportunity to kill time. And while I was just, again, hanging out in the courthouse, it's a public place, anyone can go there. I got to sit in on a couple of, ongoing matters, mostly some personal injury stuff. Well, what I know now to be personal injury stuff and traffic matters. But it was actually my first experience witnessing defense attorneys and prosecutors in the midst of their craft, right? And at the time, I wasn't exactly sure what their roles were, but I knew they looked important. And dressed all professional with their suits and ties and their dresses and their, blouses. And I said, what's that job? I want to do that. And of course, I think at the time I knew what a lawyer was as a concept, but seeing it really ignited something in me. And so over time, I learned what it took to become a lawyer, an attorney. And then I kind of set out on my own personal journey to do just that. And you do the math on how old I am, but 30 years later, a little, more like 20 years later, here I am practicing, and I've been practicing for about 10 years now.
That's awesome. I think we're about the same age because I was in middle school at that point too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Fun times, right?
Oh, yes. It was before the social media age. It was.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
We really had it the best, in my opinion, raising a child now that is 16 and then is attached to the phone that comes out of his room with the hoodie and the blanket and around, the illumination of his phone, we didn't have that. We grew up in very different times.
So really quickly, a quick story. So I actually, believe it or not, participated in my 6th grade talent show. And I am so happy that social media and cell phones with cameras were not around then, because I don't ever want that performance to be televised.
What did you do? Were y'all dancing, singing?
Oh my gosh. So, okay. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and then my family later moved to Fitchburg, which is a smaller town just outside of Worcester, Massachusetts. And reggae music was really big at the time. And so me and one of my friends danced to a reggae song. And I just wouldn't want that again to be televised. Again, I was always pretty tall, but this, tall, lanky, scrawny girl, dancing to reggae music that I probably had no business dancing to begin with, but it was fun. And like you said, we were 12, right? 11, 12. We had no idea, it was just music at the time and it had a good beat. And I listened to that song. I won't say what the song is, but I listened to that song still today. And I think my mom should have beat my tail.
I know exactly what you mean. I've had that conversation with my colleague, Katie Duncan, who works with our firm as well. We'd have music on in the office. We shared an office when I was still processing cases, and we would listen to music and say, "What were we doing? What was our like?" Our parents would like gather around and we would do our little performances, because making up a dance like back in those days, especially like if you were in chorus like I was, we got to watch Sister Act and things like that. And then we like, okay, let's make up this dance. We're going to do it at recess or whatever it was. And some of the songs we had absolutely no business listening to back then. And you listen to them now and you're like, Mom, Dad, I guess they're like, we weren't paying it. They had their own stuff going on. You know, they weren't paying that much attention.
Exactly. Fun times.
Oh, yes. A huge fan of reggae and reggaeton, and I love a good beat. You know, it's a spice of life sometimes to visit those times. Now, I saw you went to college in North Carolina. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. I actually started undergrad at UNC Greensboro. I transferred out after my sophomore year and finished up I transferred to NC State, go Wolfpack, and I finished up my undergraduate education at NC State. And then I went to law school at North Carolina Central University in Durham.
Awesome. So you got a taste of moving from Boston to
the South. Yes.
It's hot.
It was hot. I learned ma'am and sir. I learned to hold doors for people behind me. I learned a whole lot of new things about hospitality and what it means to be hospitable in the South. So, yes.
Where people wave at each other and somebody's like, do you know them? No, I
don't. Exactly. So I spent just about maybe 11 years in North Carolina. So, yeah, I had a good time down there. It was lots of fun.
Oh, yeah. I've got my cousin's cousin went to NC State. She's a little older than us, but she is a diehard. Like the Wolfpack runs deep. Like it is most definitely a pack, most definitely. So obviously you practiced law before you joined NAA. How did you get linked up with NAA? You've been with them, since 2016?
Yep, 2016. And so interestingly enough, and just a minor correction, I did not practice law until I started at NAA. Yep. So I'd always been in a compliance role, but I wasn't a practicing attorney. So at the start of my official career, if you will, I've always kind of worked in a compliance role in roles related to real estate. And so right out of law school, I went to work for the wireless communications turf vendors as a site acquisition specialist. So I wasn't practicing law in that role. In those roles, because I've held a few of them, I was responsible for making sure leasing rights, zoning rights, and other permitting rights were acquired prior to the installation of antennas on communications towers. So really unique work. Kind of like the idea once you graduate law school is, you study for the bar and then you go find a job because now you have loans to pay back, right? So I kind of took the first compliance role that I was offered, and that was actually in Maryland. So right out of law school, I moved from North Carolina up to Maryland to take that job as a site acquisition specialist. And I did that for a few years. And then I moved on. I said, okay, well, let's see what else is out there in the compliance world. And then I worked as a senior compliance specialist for the online education platform 2U. Not sure if you've heard of them or not. But my role in that position was to make sure that they had secured the proper state authorization rights to offer certain educational programs in an online format. So both of those jobs actually gave me a lot of the experience I needed post law school to move into a more traditional legal role as a practicing attorney. And so in May, again, rewind the time, in February 2016, I took the Maryland bar because again, I had moved to Maryland. So I took the Maryland bar. In May 2016, I just learned that I passed the bar. And I was sworn into the bar in July of 2016. So 2016 was a big year. It was also the year I got married. So I was doing way too much in 2016. I was doing way too much in 2016. So I was actually enjoying my compliance role at 2U because again, it was education compliance, not real estate compliance. And it was my very first job that didn't involve real estate in some form or fashion or another. And so I was really like digging into it, like, yeah, I got to learn this stuff, you know. But at the time, my good friend and mentor, shout out to Postel, said, you're now like, you have all the tools you need to actually practice law. Why aren't you practicing law? And I was like, well, I really like what I do. And, you know, and she's like, no, like, let's go get you a job as an actual attorney. Like, you need to say I'm an attorney, not I'm a compliance specialist. And, you know, she wasn't downing any of those roles. She just knew, like, you've always told me this is what you wanted to do. And now you have the tools, you have some of the experience, like, what are you doing? So basically, she snatched me up and got me together. So I started looking for positions as an attorney. And I came across a posting for the National Apartment Association for a temporary or a contract staff attorney. And I was not familiar with NA at the time. So I did some Googling and I looked at the role and what they were looking for. And I was like, oh, I can totally do this because it was dealing with leases. And hello, right? Tingly feeling is like, okay, this is transferable skills. I can do this. So I applied. I love the colleagues that I met, you know, during my time in the office for my interview. And then I was hired. So I started my contract role in September of 2016. And by January 2017, I was a full-time employee. And I actually just celebrated my 8th anniversary at NAA. So really like long, like again, I knew it was what I wanted to do, but you know how you start working in something and you just get comfortable. And I was like, I have time. I don't need to rush out and be an attorney right now. And my mentor was like, no, actually, yes, you do. This is what you've always wanted. And this is what you've desired. And, you know, I know I know you're good at this job and, you know, everything is working out, but let's go start something new. And so I intentionally appreciated the role as a contract attorney to start with NAA because I was able to see, like, is this what I really want to do? Like, I know it's what I said I wanted to do, but saying something and actually doing it are two different things. So I love that I was able to try it out. Of course, they were trying me out too, right? I just didn't know that. But I love that I had the opportunity to try out, you know, to try being a staff attorney out instead of committing to a full-time role, possibly taking away a position from someone else who wanted it and would stay there a long time. And I was able to see that, yeah, I really did love the work. And like I said, in just a short 3 months after my temporary role started, you know, I was offered a full-time role. So yeah, it's been amazing. So I've spent my entire practicing career at NAA.
That's awesome. And isn't it amazing to have those people in life that can mentor us, that see that potential, especially as women that aren't intimidated by our potential, who see it and almost like, ooh, I see this potential. I'm going to push that person.
Exactly.
It's amazing. And so thankful that she did, because now we are fortunate to have you. And I think there's an important distinction to be made that I didn't even realize. There is a difference between a practicing attorney and like someone who works in compliance. Like, yeah. Would you explain a little bit? Because I understand it, but I know if I was for a minute like, oh, duh, okay. Maybe other people might want to know the differentiation as well.
So there are certainly roles that are compliance attorney roles, but I wasn't in one of them. And so the role, when I worked at 2U and at the wireless turf vendors, my role only required a JD, which is what I had at the time. And so I was not required to be a licensed attorney to perform those roles. So basically, I worked under an attorney, but my position was not that of a licensed practicing attorney. It was strictly compliance related. And so they weren't compliance attorney roles. They were just strictly, compliance specialist, like those types of roles. So in order to call yourself a practicing attorney, you have to be licensed to practice law. And at the time, I was not licensed to practice law. I had just graduated from law school.
Gotcha. So you graduate with a Juris Doctorate and then you can go back and take bars. And that's
Yes.
how folks become licensed practicing attorneys.
Exactly, exactly. And so you also have to be licensed in the jurisdiction where you are working for certain roles. And that's why I needed to take the Maryland bar, because I was living in Maryland at the time, working in Maryland at the time. And so I needed to be licensed in Maryland to be a licensed attorney in Maryland. And so it's interesting for NAA, I have a limited, again, fully licensed to practice in the state of Maryland. And I have a limited license in Virginia to practice as corporate counsel. So that's how I'm able to be corporate counsel for the National Apartment Association.
That's so cool. And having friends now that work with our firm that are attorneys, bar prep. Oh
Oh
my
my goodness.
goodness. Oh, and working while preparing for the bar.
Yep.
Like that should be an Olympic sport. Like,
Yep. Yep. And then, I like to, spice things up a little bit. So I also planned a wedding and got married, because, it's nothing else was going on at the time, I imagine.
right. Like, aren't we all just overachievers? Let's just,
yeah.
we just set that bar so high. And
Exactly.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. We have two attorneys now that I know of right off. One is studying for the North Carolina bar, another studying for the Florida bar. And I'm like, oh
Woo.
my gosh, thoughts and prayers. Just want to
exactly. It's such a process. Exactly. It's such a process, one that I don't wish to take on anytime soon. So there's that.
I know. And anytime I've spoken to our attorneys, like, because I originally wanted to be a civil rights attorney, and I told you a little bit about why that is off camera, but I didn't end up doing that. And I've had regret. And they've said, no, you don't want these student loans. You don't want, you don't want the bar prep. You don't want to do that. There's other things that you can do. And I think our paths, our steps are ordered and things that we go through prepare us, just like when you were working in real estate compliance, like that was preparing you, looking at all, you didn't know it at the time, but your steps were being ordered. And
exactly.
I say that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff in life. And so John McDermott retired. You became the first woman and the first woman of color to hold your position. And I want to say I was in the room when that happened. Were we in Cincinnati?
Yes. I think so. Yes, I think so. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What has that been like? I mean, I was in tears there that day because we've talked about my passion and that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And one of the reasons I joined our firm was seeing that Shanae, a woman of color, was a partner. And I'm like, wow, this is really an inclusionary firm. And this is going to be a really good fit. I love this. And I had that same heartstrings moment when they announced this for you. What was that process like? What did that mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Katie, it's 2025 and we're still talking about first for women and first for people of color. Yeah. And as a Black woman, it has meant absolutely everything to me, especially knowing the work and dedication I put in to be in the position I'm in today. I am representing an underrepresented population in the legal profession. Black attorneys in the United States only make up 5% of the total number of attorneys in the United States. And that number has not changed in the last 10 years. Of that 5%, only 2% of us identify as Black women. And so, you can kind of do the math on how many of us serve as general counsel, partners, or chief legal officers in our respective organizations. You mentioned John, and if I can, love to give a quick shout out to John as NAA's former GC. Since day one, including my first day as a contractor, John has poured hours into me since my very first day at NAA. He allowed me the space I needed to learn the industry and to learn what being a staff attorney at NAA meant. He allowed me to ask questions. He allowed me to get the answer wrong and figure out what the right answer was, and then provide him with an explanation. He provided me with the opportunity to assist with NAA's amicus briefs and legal strategy. And I mean, that prep, at the time I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. And then I have to do this other stuff for John. And I had no idea what he was preparing me for. And and here I am, right? And so again, you mentioned it a bit earlier, but it's about having people who are in your corner. So having mentors and people who are your champions while you're on the job is, so very important. When I did learn, why I was doing all that work, and I'd been informed that John recommended me as NAA's next GC. I cried on the way home. I'm a big tough girl. I don't cry. But I did. And it was only not even like, it's not like I arrived at NAA saying I'm gonna be NAA's next GC, right? I was just trying to figure it out, and of course, had some promotions along the way. But to know that I was being considered and recommended for NAA's top legal position, I was just elated. And then, like you said, when we were at AOD, and they made that announcement and the standing ovation I received, like, wow, I'm like the introvert who is only an extrovert when she has to be. And so that moment for me, was, again, it was just a reminder for me that, we have a joke in the office that John's got a guy. John's so well connected and he could have recommended anyone for that role, but he recommended me, like Ayiesha Beverly, this person he just met, 5 years ago. It was 5 years ago at the time. And like I said, for me, in that moment, like you do the flashback of everything you did to get here. My daughter was 3 when I started law school. I had to work, got married later, life stuff happens and you just recognize that at this moment, in the words of Nene Leakes, I have arrived. And that's what it felt like in that moment. And, knowing, the history, like you mentioned, I'm NAA's not only first female general counsel, but first Black woman. And just knowing that history, that I'm a first in our little world, I'm a first, it just means so much to me.
Yeah, and it was being there and being able to like rise to our feet and just celebrate this moment in history for our industry really is so cool. This is something that like your grandchildren's
Yeah,
grandchildren will know about. Like your picture will be there and they can talk about it. And we talked
exactly.
about this a bit off camera too. I think it's so important for women and women of color to see you and to see that, hey, she accomplished this. I can do it too, because we never know who's watching us, who's being
Exactly.
inspired by us.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I know this was not in our questions, but I think you'll be okay answering. What would you say to those women who are and women of color who are looking at starting a legal career? Like what
Yeah.
advice would you give them?
Man, go for it, right? Don't let not having the means to do it. Everyone's paying back student loans. Right? Don't let not having the means to do it or worrying on the other side of what's going to happen, stop you from pursuing that dream. Because I can tell you, those who know me know the roadblocks I ran into and know that it was a struggle for me to overcome some of those roadblocks. And again, it took time. I was one of the older students in law school, right? I didn't go right out of undergrad. I think I was 30. Yeah, 30. No. Maybe 29, turning 30-ish when I started law school. And it's like, wait, no, that math isn't right. I was 26. I was 30 when I graduated. Sorry. Yeah. So, I didn't go right out of undergrad. And so I was an older student in law school, whereas many of my colleagues and my peers were coming straight out of undergrad. So they were maybe like 22, 23. And, like I said, here I was graduating law school, did it in 3 years, well, that's how long law school is. But I started in the evening program, which is a year-round 4-year program. And I said, yeah, I can't do this. This is too much. So I transferred to the day program. And so I was able to make up time and I still was able to complete law school in 3 years. And like I said, I had my daughter. I don't know if if you're any of your peers at the firm there have shared this with you, but the ABA puts a limitation on how many hours you can work as a full-time law school student, which was one of the reasons why I joined the evening program, is because I needed to work full-time. Because again, I had a child to support. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to the day program, so I can't work full-time. how am I gonna how am I gonna make it work, right? And I figured it out. So to those who are worried about the roadblocks, I just say just go, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it or it's not a good idea. Don't let the negative Nancy's get in the way. And no offense to anyone whose name is Nancy, but don't let the naysayers get in the way. Also, jealousy runs deep. And sometimes you find that people who are jealous or envious of what you want to accomplish will try to dampen and darken your light. And you just can't allow that to happen. You find your circle, find your crew, find your tribe, whatever you want to call it. And those are the folks you lean on while you go through the process. Because, oh my gosh, it is a process. And so I don't mean to be cliche in any of these remarks, but it's literally about finding those who support you and who are, finding those who will be a champion for you, and just making it work. I took out loans to go to law school, and I said, okay, now I just need to find a job to pay these loans back.
Exactly. And it is so important to find those people who will be there and support you. And as someone who early in my career trusted too easily and got burned, and then you end up kind of whoa, take a step back here. And sometimes it's okay if we don't find our tribe until later. I don't even hate to say later in life, but you may not find them, and you may not have those childhood friends that go all the way, with you. But
Exactly.
as I've found that as I become more seasoned and get more, kinks in the armor, basically, you get hit, and that's how you learn, And, I relate everything to a rap lyric, and if you're familiar with the artist Gangstar. And I'm not going to say the full lyric because it's a curse word, but it says it's lonely at the top, and whatever you do, you've always got to watch, I'll say, other people around
Yes.
you, and it's true. And sometimes on our way to whatever our top is, it's okay that some of those people fall out. Like it's okay to lose some folks along the way while you're finding your tribe, and
Exactly.
to identify what I call candle blower outers.
Yes.
And it's okay. And it sucks because sometimes they're women, and sometimes it breaks your heart to realize who
Right.
they are. You're like, oh,
Right.
you,
Yes.
dang.
Right. Throughout this entire process, I've shouted out my mentors, and I'm, family, right? Very important. At least for me, having the support of my family. My best friend stands on business when it comes to her best friend, Ayiesha Beverly, let me tell you. So again, another shout out to my best friend, Shanti. She was actually one of the first ladies I met when my family moved from Boston to Fitchburg. And our first day of class together, which was I started school a little late because we had moved. And my first day of class in a classroom with her, we were getting separated because we were talking too much in class, and often laugh about that. But like, you got to find you a BFF, right? You got to find you a tribe, and your tribe doesn't have to be 10 people. It can be 2 people, it can be 3 people, but like you said, it's got to be the people who support you. And it's got to be the people who are going to be there for you to lift you up when you're having those dark days, when you want to give up, when you want to say, oh, maybe I'll just stay in this role because I'm familiar with it and it's easy. You got to have those people to kind of kick you in the butt a little bit, because life will get you down. I don't mean to be sad about it, but life will get you down, and you need those people to help pick you back up. So
Absolutely. I say life be lifing sometimes.
yes.
It does. And the pendulum, just as it
Oh my gosh,
swings one
yes.
way, it's going to swing back the other. And I'm very open about my struggles with mental health. And,
Yes.
When you are very passionate about what you do and you pour it all out, you leave it all on the floor. Oh, you got to be so careful not to do that. And, as a woman of faith, I heard something the other day. The good Lord poured from his cup as it runneth over. He didn't pour out of the cup. He poured from what was running over. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes when I find myself like in here at 10 o'clock at night reading, what the
Yes.
heck has happened in the world or in our industry, and to say, no, I have a husband, I have a family. I need to cut this down. And it's so hard sometimes to differentiate who you are from the position you hold.
You
it's
better give our
interesting.
listeners a word today.
That's right. That's right. They didn't know they was coming to church. They're going to get churched and schooled today. They didn't know that. But it is. And when you're so passionate, especially as a woman, now that you've hit the mark, it's like you got to stay there. Now that,
Yes.
the
Well, not only do
pressure.
you have to stay there, but you have to prove the naysayers wrong, right? Like the people who question, why is she in that role? Well, let me show you. Right. So it's, and I do obviously, I do my job with a lot of passion, but a lot of it is also to show people that I do deserve to be here and I did work hard to get here. And there's nothing you can say, do, you know, that can stop me from, from shining. As I've gotten older, I've been more intentional about not allowing others to dim my light. So.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, in the words of Lauryn Hill, my history, my destiny is manifest. Like it's been manifested. We're walking into, we've poured into it, put the work in, and it is so important to keep walking in our purpose. It's so hard
Exactly.
sometimes, and
Exactly.
we talked a lot about the general counsel. What does, for those who don't know, like I can tell you from, and I said this off camera, I see you running around committee meetings. Been very blessed to have served on the NAA board, chaired an NAA committee, served on NAA committees, and you're running around, like you're the one running around with Robert's rules heavily tabbed. Like, what does the general counsel, what does that role entail?
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
busy from what I
Yes.
gather.
Well, and for our listeners, if you are a fan of watching me run around like a chicken with its head cut off, I carry around 3 different versions of Robert's rules. There's the actual text of the rules, which is like 700 pages. There's our Robert's rules for dummies, because sometimes I'm like, duh, Ayiesha.
I mean, we got to
Right?
break it down sometimes.
You got to
Right?
break it down in the layman's terms, and then there's a quick brief for if you just need to reference something really quickly. So for those of you who are on your Robert's Rules game, I would recommend you get all 3 copies, because read together, it's an amazing resource. But anyways, the role of a general counsel or a GC. So, from organization to organization, like the role is different, but I imagine every GC is doing lots of reading, lots of research, and learning. Like we never stop learning, from either attending conferences to learn more to presenting conferences. I never stop learning in this role. And as the association's top legal advisor, not only to our internal leadership, but to our board of directors, which you said, which you serve on, it's my responsibility to provide our leaders with legal advice and take responsibility for overseeing, the legal matters of the association. Some of them we are able to foresee and we can plan in advance. Some of them happen on a dime, and I've got to be able to head on a swivel, right? So that's sometimes when I'm running, something's happened on a dime, and that's that head on a swivel. And so in addition to, just providing that strategic legal advice, I manage NAA related litigation. I ensure compliance, obviously, with the laws and regulations that govern and affect NAA. Can't forget about contracts. I review our contracts. We keep up with NAA's intellectual property, that click and lease logo, all those, CAMT logos, we register those, and the list goes on. And of course, I would be doing myself a disservice if I made it sound like I do all of this on my own. I do this work with the help of my fabulous, small but mighty legal affairs team. So if I can continue my path of shouting folks out,
Yes,
shout
please.
out to Brianna, Mark Poist, Mark Russell. We got Mark squared on the team, so that's why I say their last names. Brittany and Lauren. That's our team. We are hiring, so if you're looking for a role as a staff attorney, check out NAA Careers. But that's the team that allows me to, do the work that's necessary, because they're all skilled and experienced legal staff as well. So Brianna and Lauren are our paralegals, and Brittany, Mark, and Mark are our staff attorneys. And like I said, they are the pillars that allow me to keep keep moving, right? Because there are times when I'm like, hey, I need you to do this, and hey, I need you to do that, or hey, can we collaborate on this? And it allows us to keep the trains and the clock moving with the work we do with regard to NAA. And I will say my favorite part about the role as a GC is because everything is always changing and there's so much going on. There haven't been any 2 days that have been the same. Every day is different, at NAA, especially on the legal affairs team.
Oh yeah, there's so much that hits the industry at all the time. It's
Oh my
it's like,
gosh,
when do y'all
yes.
sleep? Like it's
We do. Oh my gosh, we don't. So my team will tell you, and it's not a proud moment at all. This is not a flex. I am not bragging. I don't sleep well, and so instead of putting on relaxing music and easing my way back to dream world, I'll pick up my phone and be like, what email can I get out really quickly? And so I've had to like put a pause on that because there have been times I'm up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and because I can't go back to sleep, I'm like, let me just bang out some work really quickly. So, I don't sleep, and it's not work related. So I don't want anyone to think NAA is running me to the ground. Like they're working that woman too hard. No, it's just that, when I cannot sleep, my first thought is, what can I respond to that'll make my morning a little easier, because I know I'm about to be super tired when I finally do get up.
yes, like how can you be productive in that moment?
In that moment,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And been there as a property manager myself, like when there's so many things that come in and you're like, it's really, you'd have to do the work anyway. Like it was going
Right,
to be there anyway.
right.
So what's the difference if I just knock this out right now when I'm actually feeling like I have the wherewithal to do so,
Exactly,
versus in the
exactly.
morning when, I'll probably dream that I already did this and have to go back and check and make sure that I'm not duplicating
Right.
work. Like,
Exactly. I was so happy when they moved the schedule send feature to the mobile version of Outlook, because I can at least write the email and then schedule it to go out at like 8 o'clock. And the team laughs at me. They're like, we always know when you schedule send an email because it comes right at 8 o'clock or it comes right at 7:55. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't want you guys to see that I was up at 3:24 in the morning responding to emails.
exactly, exactly. Then all of a sudden you have people like, are you okay? Like, I mean,
Oh, when I tell you, oh my gosh, our COO Amy, she worries about me, and I'm like, it's okay. I promise I'll figure it out. Figure it out. But she's like, yeah, I know. I saw you responded at X, Y, and Z. No, you know what the funny thing is when we travel and we're in different time zones, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, you were up at 4 o'clock. I'm like, no, no, no. It was only 1 a.m. I mean, that's still late, but it wasn't 4 a.m. It was 1 a.m. I'm in California.
right,
So
exactly.
yeah, I promise, for our listeners, it's not work related. I'm not being, overworked and, kind of thing. It's just, I've never kind of slept well. And, with so much going on in the industry, there's always an email I can respond to at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, I'm sure. I am sure. And, speaking of like we're talking about experience. What do you see being some challenges? Like, I mean, what it's keeping all of us up at night, but what do we see
Yes.
being like our challenges? I've seen stuff and stuff comes out. You guys are always so on top of things,
Oh,
like
thank
so on
you.
top of it,
Yeah.
with keeping everyone updated. What do you see being some challenges that are going to continue to hit the industry for the rest of this year, and maybe even beyond?
Right. So, Katie, what keeps me up at night are the same issues that keep our members up at night. And so, you hear this question being asked almost at every meeting NAA has, what is keeping you up at night? And we constantly hear from members that, issues with overregulation of the industry, housing affordability, rising insurance costs, rent control, the increased scrutiny and litigation that's going on, the lingering effects of COVID era regulations. Fee transparency pops up on that list quite often as well too. These are all issues that are of significant importance to the industry. And again, you mentioned 25 and beyond. These are issues we expect will continue past this year. Some of them we've been dealing with for quite some time, at least since I've been at NAA. And like I said, that's been 8 years now. Rent control was huge 8 years ago, and here we are still fighting the good fight. And so these are the issues that we're currently monitoring. And these, the responses we get from our members about what keeps them up at night, we also use that information to inform what type of operational resources and advocacy efforts, we need to put forth as an organization. For example, the recent resource we released on immigration enforcement, we worked with outside counsel to make sure our members had a resource because, again, in this moment, that's what was keeping them up at night. And so we hear you guys when you say, hey, we're dealing with this issue. If it's something that's new to us, we're hopping on it, right? If it's something we've been dealing with for a while, we're talking to you about our advocacy and our other, maybe if it's a legal issue, maybe legal advocacy efforts to address the matter. So we hear you guys. And I just want to make sure our listeners know that we're actively advocating on behalf of our membership, making sure some of these challenges get resolved, going forward. We can't, some of these battles, we're in them for the long haul. And, we just need to make sure that we're constantly tapping into the experiences our members are having.
And there's often times where members are asked for comment for your
Yeah.
stories. Like it's so
Yes.
important. Like my colleague Katie, one of her comments on resident screening was one of the, I think 2000 that was collected.
Yeah.
It's mainly for HUD properties, but that was collected that resulted in a favorable outcome,
Yeah.
for the industry. So that
Yep.
was really cool. Folks, listen,
Yes,
answer
they
when they
do.
call.
And I don't want to get too much out of my wheelhouse here, but I will say when you hear our government affairs team issue a call to action, respond. Please respond. So the fact that you mentioned that comment response is kind of set the light bulb off. We do a lot of call to actions, and it's just important that we have, the full participation of the membership.
For sure. And if folks listen in every month to the Advocacy and Legal Update,
Yes. Yes.
it's a great way to become informed and to know what is out there, because just because it's not in your state right now does not mean that it
It's
won't
not
be.
coming. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's where
Exactly.
Nicole and her team kind of
Exactly.
take the
Exactly.
charge. So if folks are having issues on the state level that they haven't brought to Nicole's team, if you haven't seen it in an advocacy and legal update, I'd say reach out and let them know, because there's things I didn't know how we collaborate sometimes with real strategies. Like there's so many
Yeah.
avenues to
Yes.
help if folks are fighting. They're totally not alone out there.
Exactly. Exactly. Agree. Totally agree. And that's what we're here for, right? Like let NAA know we are a resource, that, we want you guys to tell us what's going on so we can, do what we do best. And, try to fight these bills at the federal level, assist you in fighting them at the state and local level. That's literally our job.
And NAA has been highly effective
Yeah.
at doing these things, and it has to be proud. What's a moment like as an attorney that you could say, "I'm really that was amazing. Like I am proud of."
Yeah. So, okay, there are Ayiesha moments. One of them is, I have two moments for you actually. One of them is like a personal Ayiesha moment, and the other one's kind of related to NAA. So, my first proud moment is when I was sworn in as an attorney. Again, it was a reminder that I did it, like hurdles all knocked down. I did it, My daughter and husband joined me for my swearing in ceremony. And it was a good reminder for me that I was not the only one who sacrificed, during that time. I mentioned my daughter was 3 when I started law school. And by default, she became very independent very quickly. I was putting like juice box and little Lunchables on the bottom shelf in the refrigerator so she could reach them, so she didn't have to, ask me for a snack if I, if I wasn't, in an immediate room with her or something. I also mentioned that while I was studying for the Maryland bar exam, I was still working. I did reduce my hours to part-time while I was studying. And then my husband just came in and picked up my role in our personal life, like without complaint. And so it was amazing having that support, not only from, again, my immediate, my family, like my siblings and my parents, but also having it from my husband and my daughter, who she makes me laugh now, because when people say, "Oh, do you want to be a lawyer like your mom?" She's like, "No." And I think it's because she's like, I saw what she went through. Like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go on and be something else. And so, like I said, just, it's just a reminder that, yes, the sacrifice was mine, but there are people on my journey that came along with me who sacrificed as well. And my second proud moment is my NAA moment, where I am today. I mentioned that I've been a practicing attorney now for almost 10 years, and I made the role of GC in my first 7, right? And so everywhere I show up professionally, it's not only for NAA, but again, and we touched on this a bit earlier, but it's also showing up for those who look just like me, wondering, is it possible? And can I do this? And the answer to that is absolutely. And so those would be my most proud moments as an attorney.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And we have our foundation. It's our rock. It's who we come back home to. It's you guys travel a lot.
Oh gosh,
And
yes.
and you've
Yes.
got having someone at home that'll remember to like, okay, the dog needs this medicine at this time.
Yep, right, exactly.
They're so
Exactly.
important. And our kids keep us humble
Oh my
too.
gosh,
Like,
yes.
oh my God. Yes.
So, unrelated, so I was maybe in like my second year of law school. And you know me, I wear my afro. I got my braids in today, but I shaved off my hair, so it was like really, 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 really short. And I did it while my daughter was she was like at daycare for the day. And so when I picked her up, she kind of like tilted her head to the side, and her first words were, "Mommy, you are not a princess anymore."
Oh,
Excuse me, ma'am. I was like, first of all, princesses can be bald headed too.
yes.
And she,
Yes.
but her little mind, like all the princesses had long, flowy hair, and mommy wasn't a princess anymore. So when you talk about how they humble you, oh my goodness.
Absolutely. And she's smart. She didn't know she was probably referencing the Crown Act, like
Right. Like,
I can wear my hair however.
I can wear my hair how I want, how it grows out my head. Yeah, but I literally, I think that was like the only thing I told her. Like, princesses come in all different shapes, sizes, and color, and some of them have hair, and some of them don't. And
That's
I
right.
think like the Princess and the Frog shortly came out afterwards, and I was like, yes, representation. But then she had hair too, and I was like, darn it,
I know, right? Validation somewhere. Disney will,
somewhere.
yeah, they will make this happen. They will make this
Disney, if
happen.
you're listening,
That's right. We need a princess who has the courage to just take it,
take it off. Exactly. And
Exactly.
maybe I'm missing a Pixar movie or a Disney film or something, but I'm pretty sure we're not there yet. But maybe if this crosses Disney's channels, they'll take our thoughts into consideration. I mean, our feedback into consideration.
I hope so. I hope so. My husband has a young man who works with him who was accepted into Disney's like art school kind of thing. Yeah. He wanted to create the first princess with autism. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I talk a lot about my own journey in neurodiversity and learning, through the great oracle of TikTok, that in the words of Taylor Swift, like it's me. Like I thought Jackson, he has ADHD. It's been a long journey. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm just high masking. That's what all this overperformance and that's what all of this is. And it's humbling. You're like, oh my gosh, this whole time I thought, my mother-in-law is very hyper and squirrel. I'm like, I know where Jackson got this from. And then I'm like, oh no, it's me
It's
too.
me. Yeah.
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 Like the cabinets in the kitchen that are open when I, those kind of things are the great oracle
Yeah.
of TikTok has helped me kind of identify, but it helps me help Jackson too.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, now I know what I had to go through and just high masking,
Exactly. Exactly.
and to help him. And yeah, they definitely keep us humble. You never know what's going to come out of their mouth, out of the mouths of babes, they say.
Right, right. And I'm not a mental health or a medical professional, so I just say these comments with that disclaimer. But I'm finding that just in the circle, I associate with that there are a lot of later in life, diagnosis of ADHD, and I'm happy that that's happening because it lets me know that we've kind of removed the stigma of having, someone saying out loud, I've been diagnosed. So to hear you talk about that actually, means just a lot to me because like I said, it's, I just remember back in the day, like we didn't talk about those things, and so folks actually going out and taking care of themselves and self-care and getting the proper mental health and medical treatment for whatever reason, whether it's depression or, whether they're suffering from, like you mentioned, I'm noticing I'm kind of hyperactive, like what's going on, going out and getting those proper, assessments. Like that's self-care. It's how we take care of ourselves. So I'm just noticing a lot of that in like my circle. And I put mental health and medical together because it's, it's an assortment of things, not just one or the other. So again, not a mental health or medical professional, just something it's just an observation.
Oh, for sure. And it can be a superpower. And if folks get the right kind of guidance, they can learn to channel it into their superpower, like
Exactly.
a hyper focus. And I found with myself in like justice and law and that kind of thing, I'm like, oh, I thought I was just really interested in it. I didn't realize it was like a hyper focus kind of thing. And then when
Right.
you go all in, and
Right.
it can be a superpower. And it's so cool
Yeah.
that we have mass like unstigmatizing, if that's a word, but
Yeah. Yes.
destigmatization or something of it, where folks can be their true and authentic self.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love
And
it.
I think
And
that's why I'm happy to hear so many people talk about it. Like I said, you know, it's been around forever. I think ADHD was commonly referred to back then as ADD, I think. And I just remember, when you heard that someone had ADD, it was like, oh, and it was like something you just didn't talk about. So hearing people talk about, overcoming things again, like depression, and overcoming, and how they not maybe not overcoming, or maybe overcoming, I'm not sure, how they're dealing with their ADHD, and other diagnoses. It's just like, I don't know, I just find it empowering, very empowering.
yeah, me too. And NAA has, the mental health first aid.
Mental
I
health
know,
league. Yep.
yeah, a few folks that I know have gone through and have become like mental health first aid
Yep.
certified. And it helps when we have a propensity to burn the candle at both ends,
Yes.
and to kind of help us just to recenter, just
Right. Right.
bring
Right.
it back, bring it back. And now, NA has worked tirelessly on behalf of members to ensure the industry's viewpoints are represented to government agencies. How does the legal team accomplish this? How do y'all manage to just stay on top of
Right.
everything?
Collaboration, collaboration, and collaboration. So, no, seriously, we do collaborate a lot with our government affairs team. They quarterback those efforts, if you will, for NAA. But the work our team does, the legal affairs team does on this front, is also critical. So, we have our legal advocacy program. That's a very important staple in NAA's advocacy efforts. For those listeners not familiar, it's a mechanism by which our membership can request legal assistance for their battles, whether it's through submitting an amicus brief or participating as a plaintiff in litigation that's related to the industry. And it's through these briefs and this participation where we are able to get the industry perspective heard, in courtrooms, throughout the nation. So in the past, we've submitted amicus briefs in cases challenging rent control, takings claims, premises liability, reasonable accommodations. The list kind of goes on there. This year, well, we're in 2025 now. So at the end of last year, we participated in litigation challenging gas bans and other environmental regulations that impact our industry. But I would say our biggest effort to date is our ongoing challenge to the CDC's eviction moratorium. That's Darby Development v. USA. This is how we're able to, impact change in courtrooms. You saw recently the Iowa Supreme Court invalidated the 30-day notice to vacate CARES Act notice to vacate for Iowa housing providers. And our legal assistance program, our legal advocacy program, assisted our Iowa affiliate in submitting an amicus brief as part of a coalition. So, just things like that is how we get in front, and we make sure that we show up for our members through our legal advocacy program.
Yeah, and it's much appreciated. You can imagine like the owner operators in those areas.
Yes.
Like I think now, like if we think, we'll eventually get past this in one way, shape, or form. And when we do, when folks have to go back to normal, when they go back to enforcing their lease agreements, there's probably, and I know because we've had some come through the firm, the questions of like, okay, how do I go back to normal? Because
Right,
the
right.
fact that it's been since 2021 that
2021. Yep.
and that's when I left on site and came to the supplier side for Loebsack and Brownlee, and we're an eviction focused legal services. I'm like, how did y'all operate? You had a moratorium that you couldn't file eviction, like, and you're an
Yep,
eviction law firm, like learning those kind of things and just knowing that there's so much work that was being done behind the scenes and that these things are marathons. They're not sprints. So
exactly.
you've just got to
Exactly.
continue to fight the good fight and continue to beat the drum until we start seeing cases like the Iowa case that came out in the last week and a half. And we're going to continue to see, in my opinion, those wins on those levels and just being involved, understanding that, normal, who defines normal anyway? But
Yeah.
when we go back to being, I just call it enforcing your lease agreement, because
Right.
that was the crazy thing to me is I would sit across from folks that are signing a lease agreement, and the property that I managed was a Fannie Mae backed property, and saying, okay, rent's due on the 1st, it's late after the 5th, however, comma, you know, I would just go into, if you can't pay your rent, I'm highly connected, because I'm involved with like the Greenville Homeless Alliance. And back
Right.
then, the Greenville Housing Fund, they had millions of dollars in ERAP funds. I'm like, if we'll get your rent paid. And I would tell them on the slide, I don't even think they really vet in these applications, but I mean, because I would see folks get approved and I knew, their situation. I'm like, hey, but the rent's getting paid. You're good. They've got to use those funds anyway. And that years later that they're still in that situation in some states where they can't enforce their lease agreement. So it's
Exactly.
much appreciated to have a watchdog such
Yeah.
as NAA out there that is abreast of all these things in real time and know what's going on. And we talked a little bit about the advocate conference coming up. Now what you do is different. It's in a different vein of advocacy, because I helped start the Advocacy Academy. We're training members in how to advocate. That's not advocacy as it relates to what you do and what your
Right.
team does. Can you explain what your team does as far as legal advocacy, and how do you guys get prepared for the marathon that is advocate?
Right. So you mentioned it. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? So advocate is going and, it's lobbying efforts. So our team kicks in when those lobbying efforts are unsuccessful in a manner that's not favorable to the industry, right? So we kick in when it's now time to challenge that rule or that regulation that's impacting our members. I mentioned to answer your last question, I mentioned some of the issues we've recently been involved with, but that's when we kick in. So when our legislative affairs team and our government affairs team is not successful, that's when they say, okay, legal, what can we do? Can we challenge this? Can we challenge it on constitutional grounds? Can we point back to, case law? Like, where can we challenge this? And the one thing I wanted to mention about the Iowa CARES Act case is that case is only binding in Iowa, but it's persuasive for other jurisdictions. And so when we get a win, like the one we saw in Iowa, I'm hoping we get a flood of applications, saying, hey, let's take this to the higher level now so we can try to get this consistent opinion across the board. Because as we know, courts in other jurisdictions have not struck down the CARES Act in the manner that the Iowa Supreme Court struck down the CARES Act for housing providers in the state. And so, when we talk about legal advocacy, we're talking about, change happening in the court system, in the judicial system. When we were prepping, before we came on camera, we were talking about how every jurisdiction is different. And so how are housing providers supposed to operate when they have to keep a notebook for every jurisdiction? And sometimes it's not just a state notebook. You might need the state notebook, but then you need the locality notebook, and because you have so many rules and regulations that you have to follow. And so how do they, how does, the folks who govern, the landlord-tenant relationship from a policymaking process, how do they expect operators to effectively operate when you do it this way in one jurisdiction and you do it that way in another, and you do it yet another way in a third jurisdiction? And so having some consistency, and some of the most basic things, like that's the starting point, right? So this patchwork of, laws and regulations that our members have to follow, it creates a patchwork of laws and regulation that we have to follow too, because, we have to keep up with regulation, not only for our membership, but, plug for click and lease, but because of click and lease, and so it's an ongoing task. We have trackers, we have databases, we have alerts. We're hearing things from our membership, asking our membership. We always tell folks about the legal advocacy program, and let NAA know if we can be of assistance. We revamped the program last year, and I'm very pleased with the outcome of our efforts from revamping the program. But literally, it's just letting us know so that we can keep an eye on it. It's probably already something we are tracking. As you mentioned, there's, members are dealing with different issues across the country, but, how can we affect change in a manner that's going to be beneficial for the majority of our members? So our legal advocacy program takes appellate cases, and we take cases that go to the Supreme Court, because those are opinions that will affect the majority of our members, or a higher majority of our members, versus just one single entity. And so that's, long-winded way of saying we're in the courts. That's where our team's focus is. It's in the courts, and it's in the judicial process.
Yeah, and it takes the collective efforts of
Yes.
of both to make it work. Having served on NAA committees now, going to conferences since 2020, I was one of those folks we talked about just got comfortable in their job. And so I was managing my property and not realizing that you're part of something so much bigger, that if something had changed on the federal level that could have fundamentally changed the way that I operated my property, I was the one out there at first, like saying, oh, wait, y'all, did y'all know this was coming? And although we didn't have a law firm at the time, it was me filing the cases. We didn't use the firm I work for now. So it was me navigating them. And because I had the information from NAA, I could tell them, the management company, what was coming. And then quickly, I'm going to use a little legal term, I hope it impresses you, respondeat superior.
Yes.
And of course, I went to college to be a paralegal, but in the words of Jay-Z, I ain't past the bar, but I know a little bit. So I'm like, okay, y'all, you need to get an attorney, because I can only tell you guys from my level of understanding. Right. And during that whole thing, when it said the broker in charge could go to jail if our notices were not correct, and we did not want the president and CEO of our company, if I mess up, like, for him to go to jail.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Are we using the company card for bail money? What expense category are we going to code that to, right? So
blame that one to the auditors.
Exactly. So what are we doing here? But it was so important to have been involved and to know just now, like, that there are both sides of it, where if I've gotten as far as I can get in advocacy with NAA, is to have been very blessed. And one of the moments in my life to, like, wow, when they asked me to help start the Advocacy Academy, it's, because the three members of Congress that represent my affiliates' membership are on two of our three. Surprised I couldn't get them on the Section 8 bill. That's the only one that I can't get them on. And I'm like, oh, but not for lack of trying. We've met.
Right,
and,
exactly.
I have a feeling that Victoria Cowart is going to bring laminated 7 cents to represent the return on the dollar, break down the value of a dollar of rent, which is such an impactful tool to use when you're advocating. I just attended VAMA's lobby day, and that was part of our packet, was to give them that. And I do believe that Congressman Norman, representing South Carolina's 5th District, Victoria is going to have 7 cents for him. He's an owner operator himself, a developer. So she wanted him to understand. And she said, when the folks come in talking about the greedy landlord, I want you to remember the 7 cents. So I've got to remind her that get that lamination ready.
Yeah, get it laminated. Exactly.
Maybe we should all do that this year. Maybe it's
I will pass that on to Seth and Seth and Greg Brown here at NAA. Maybe it's not just a resource we allow you guys to print, but maybe we are doing the laminate. He may not like me committing his resources to that, but I'm actually going to pass that on.
Yeah, it's impactful. They'll have it on their desk. It could be like a paperweight kind of thing.
Exactly.
They'll have it on their desk as a visual.
I know we prepare the folders, but no, we need a laminated copy of the dollar rent. That way they don't throw it away. It's there. They can hang it up on their wall. Don't have to worry about it getting destroyed or coffee stains. You're ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a very important piece of research. Shout out to our research team for putting together that resource for members.
Oh yeah, it's highly effective. Like when you like it was almost like when I would show apartments and I wouldn't give the people the floor plan because I wanted them to listen to me instead of looking at the floor plan.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
such an impactful
Hmm.
resource that you have to strategically give it to them because then they start looking at it and they
Yes.
start digesting it, and then you may have lost them for a second, which you want to, but you've got to use it strategically.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
it's one of those, as soon as they drop that line, I'm going to creep up from behind. One of those things. Like, you've got to time it just right to
Yep.
where when to use it. And when you're trained, and NAA is wonderful at training advocates, there's a method to the madness, and there's a way to do it. But when those efforts may not be as successful as we want them to be, you've got your backup.
Right.
You've
Right.
got your
Right.
legal team that's there
Yep.
ready to go in and say, oh, okay, it didn't work this way. Well, I got something else for you.
Yep. Let's try this. Exactly.
Yeah,
Let's try it this way.
let's put
Exactly.
our heads together. And so, kind of to wrap up today, you work hard and you work a lot. How do you wind down? Like, what do you do? Like, are you a wine in a book, or are you a Netflix, or like how do you wind down?
Yep. So if you've ever heard me present, one of my favorite fun facts is sharing that I'm a huge fan of video games. So I love video games. We have like 8 video game systems in my house. It's ridiculous. And my favorite video game system is the Nintendo series. And I love anything with Mario Brothers. So huge fan. I buy all the Mario games, and actually was just playing some Mario Kart 8 this weekend. And that said, even with the portability of the Nintendo Switch, it's not always possible or appropriate, to whip out the video game. And so I would say my second favorite thing to do to wind down is, open a good book. I love a good murder mystery. My colleagues probably question me because I tell them if someone wasn't buried alive, I don't want to read it. Right. So I'm reading a book right now called The 23rd Midnight by James Patterson and Maxine Petro. I hope I said that last name correctly. It's a nice, good whodunit. Right. And I like, so if it's not my video games, it's my books. And you mentioned we travel so much. I recently picked up a Kindle Scribe maybe last summer, and that has helped because now, I can bring my entire collection with me because it's on a device, and I don't have to worry about bringing a hardcover book. So, yep, reading and video games. That's the wind down for me.
That's awesome. And I always ask my guests at the end, what is your favorite song and why? Or do you have a favorite song?
Oh, of course I have a favorite song. So my favorite song is Video by Indie Irie. And are you familiar?
Yes.
Yeah,
Not your average girl from the video.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
So that song, like when it came out, I think I was a senior in high school. And look at me. I gotta stop dating myself, Katie.
Oh, no, me too. I mean, I'm class of 01. I'm out there.
Yeah,
I'm
class of 01. Exactly.
Hey, we have more in common than we thought. Yeah, same for me. Yep.
Yeah. So, as a senior in high school and that song came out, and if you know me, I truly am Ayiesha, right? This is how I show up every day, all day. And so that song just speaks to being authentic, it speaks of being who you are, and that song just speaks to me. And so I would say that is that's my favorite song.
I love it. I love it. And I'm probably going to go listen to it too, because now it's going to be stuck in my head.
Yes.
And if you listen, if folks really do listen to the lyrics, especially as women, your worth is not determined by the price of your clothes.
Exactly.
You learn to love yourself.
Exactly. That third verse is my favorite. I'm also not a singer, but, don't be offended. This is all my opinion. Ain't nothing that I'm saying, law. It is a true confession of a life-learned lesson I was sent here to share with y'all. So get in where you fit in, go on and shine, clear your mind. Now's the time. Put your salt on the shelf. Go on and love yourself, because everything is going to be all right. That's my jam.
Yes, I love it. I love it.
You can edit that part out. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, this is the real spill. This is the real spill, and that's amazing. I think it'll give listeners and members more of an insight into who you are as a person, and I love it. And I thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yes, absolutely. We always have a great time when we get together, and open invite to come back anytime. Certainly appreciate it. And thank you so much. And
thank you, Katie.
You're welcome for today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And that's a wrap on today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work together with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something new. Now, go be a voice. Until next time, Spills out.